Oh, wow. It's working today. Okay. Hello. 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 Whoa. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. I just want to make sure my microphone was working because I know there's been some issues with that. Let me just put this up on Instagram too quickly. So give me 1 second. Usually I do it the other way around, but here we are today. So let me flip this. Let's go. I hope you're having a wonderful Friday. Let me get this just kind of up and running quick. I know I'm having a lovely Friday. I'm excited. It's very dark. I noticed some of the lighting. No, usually during the day it's fine because I have like two windows behind me, but maybe I need like another light behind here. But that's here nor there. That's probably not something you're interested in. What we are interested today is bowel health, digestive health. That is what we're going to be talking about today. I'm really excited about it. If you're watching, by the way, on YouTube, if someone could tell me if the audio is working, that's great because the audio hasn't been working the past few times. And I just uploaded the past two videos. I actually downloaded the videos from Instagram and then uploaded them here, which is not ideal, but something was going on with the hey, what's up? How we doing? Uh, with the audio on the YouTube end, and I was having trouble. It like wasn't coming through. So I'm good. It's great that it's good here. I'm hoping it's good on YouTube too. By the way, if you're on Instagram and you are not subscribed to my YouTube channel, that would be great. And you could pick up Nature's Cabinet because we're going to be talking about that today a little bit because I'm going to be talking about some of these herbs. So okay, so I'm just going to pin this quick. Oh, hey, Dr. Brad, how we doing? So, what we're going to be talking about today a little bit is again, gut health, bowels. We're talking about gut flushes. I know we were talking about that the last couple days. So, what can we do? There's a ton of different parasites. Oh boy, maybe we'll get into that a little bit too today. I don't want to get too down the rabbit hole into what are parasites or does everyone have parasites, but maybe we could touch on it maybe on the back end here because I do have some material that I want to go through here. So if we make it through that, maybe we'll have a secondary conversation about parasites in general. But the long and short of that, maybe we could get into that quick, is I think what most people assume are parasites, because if you're not testing, you don't really know, are usually, in my experience, they're either some sort of like mucus buildup or maybe what's known as biofilms, or it's usually like I find a lot of fungal and yeast overgrowth, and that's usually following like a history of antibiotics. So we'll get into the gut and that a little bit later. But not to say that parasites don't exist or don't occur in people. They're definitely more common, I would say, in maybe like more third world countries, but they do happen here, but not at the rate. Everyone who's doing a parasite cleanse for the most part isn't expelling parasites. I'd imagine it's not, it just doesn't happen at that rate. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about gut health in 2023, why this is important, and how do we get on top of it. So it starts, first of all, it's going to come back to stress. So remember, we talk about this all the time. There's three different types of stress, which are physical, chemical, and emotional. And our nervous system and our digestive system are intricately linked. So, yes, on the yeast train, I mean, it's just true that that's kind of the way it works. Is it's that just tends to be what happens when you're taking a lot of antibiotics or something like that. It tends to lead to fungal yeast overgrowths. That's usually the pockets that open up. If you think of it like an ecosystem, those are the things that grow once you clear out some of the forest, so to speak. Yeah, it's tough, but that doesn't mean it doesn't work or the herbs aren't helpful. Like different antimicrobial herbs will help with fungal yeast. It's just changing your frame of reference. And it doesn't mean that doing a cleanse using the same tools that you would use are different. Anyway, digestion and nervous system. So these two are intricately linked. Where it starts is the vagus nerve. Now, you might have heard of that, but this nerve is essentially responsible for communicating all of the stuff that goes on in our digestive tract back up to the brain. And most of it's sensory information. So about 90% of it is sensory. So it's relaying all that information back to the brain, and this affects to a pretty large degree how we think, how we feel. So if you have, a gut feeling, or if you aren't really, if you feel like you might have brain fog, or sometimes have some sort of low mood, gut health, having poor gut health is related to that. Now, obviously, poor gut health isn't going to be the cause of every case of depression or anxiety. There's, of course, other traumas. There's physical and emotional stressors that can do that. But more often than not, there is a gut component. And part of this is responsible from the vagus nerve. And it's essentially the highway of communication between our digestive organs, the stomach, the intestines, the liver, pancreas, gallbladder, and the brain. And if that is disrupted, or if that is altered in some way, that's going to affect not only how the brain interprets everything, but also how the health of the gut in general. For example, we know already that roughly half of your dopamine and over 90% of your serotonin is actually manufactured in the gut from microbes and then shuttled up to the brain. And those are, your dopamine and serotonin are really responsible for rewards, but also generally like a higher mood in general. So really important to understand that these two are intimately related in that way. If we use celiac disease, for example, if we just kind of use that as a example here, like when we take a step back, we realize that celiac disease is an allergy to gluten. Now, gluten is nothing more than just a protein. And what happens here is it's a protein that makes its way through the intestinal lining. And then if it does that, it triggers an immune response. Now, normally the whole point of digestion is to break down proteins into amino acids. So it's really about getting the amino acids that can be utilized. Carbohydrates of any kind, eventually into glucose or fructose that can be used as energy, and then fats or lipids into fatty acids. The important thing to realize here is, like, you have to break them down into those individual constituents. It's like different Lego pieces. So if they're not broken down into the individual Lego pieces, they're going to end up causing some problems. And this is what happens with gluten. It's usually not gluten itself, at least in my opinion, that causes the problem. It's the result of it. So if you have a leaky gut, where example, like you're supposed to have a mesh type of response, or integrity of your gut lining, and it gets leakier, those pores widen, bigger things can get through that netting. One of these happens to be gluten, and that has become a bigger thing. Now, there's a lot of different reasons for it. We're going to get into that in a little bit, but we know that things like celiac disease are becoming way more common, along with a lot of different autoimmune type issues. Now, why is autoimmune important? Remember, roughly 80% of our immune system is located right around that gut lining. So not all, most of our immune system is interacting. That is how it interacts with our external environment. Because if you think of the digestive tract, it's really just a tube, but it's also the only internal opening that we have to the outside world. Now we have our skin, but that's not obviously inside, it's exterior. Our digestive tract is technically more connected to the outside world than our internal environment. And we have, one end at the front and one end out the back, but it's essentially a long tube. So that is why most of our immune system is there, and it's trained very often by the different things that are found in this gut. And if things are off, or if there's any sort of permeability, intestinal permeability, i.e., leaky gut, that can cause some issues down the road. Now, remember, so how this goes, and remember, how does the nervous system come into this? Remember, in the gut brain connection, the enteric nervous system. So this is what the vagus nerve kind of splits off of. It's called the enteric nervous system. And this is the linkage between, again, the gut and the brain. And it consists of over 100 million different neurons that go up to the brain and feed that. So it's incredibly sensitive, and it takes in a massive amount of information because, again, this is the information that's getting from the outside world into our internal environment. So that's kind of really important to kind of see. Now, when we're talking about celiac disease, it does come with some long-term health effects, like because it's not just necessarily gluten, it's going to affect your digestion outside of that too. So it could lead to things like iron deficiency anemia, um, poor bone health, so osteoporosis, osteopenia, infertility is associated with it, lactose intolerance, vitamin and mineral deficiencies, and this is because of an inability to absorb them. It could lead to central and peripheral nervous system issues, um, other sort of like GI issues like intestinal cancers, neurological issues, maybe some issues with gallbladder and bile function. So there's a lot that can go on here. Now, as of right now, we know the only quote unquote treatment for celiac disease is just gluten free 100%. And if that is something you have, that is probably something you should do, especially for the short term. Now, this isn't going to necessarily fix the problem, but it is going to avoid the symptoms. So, again, what's happening here is, again, Glutens are essentially proteins. When there is increased intestinal permeability, those proteins can go through and they're not broken down into the amino acids they need to be to get properly absorbed. The holes are essentially big enough for gluten to get through, or things like gliadin to get through. So this is leaky gut. When that happens, we have an immune response, and then the body kind of attacks the quote unquote invader. This is thought to be at least partially how autoimmune diseases progress, because again, so much of our immune system is around that gut lining. If it's constantly in overdrive because things are getting through the gut lining that shouldn't, that can potentially lead to systemic symptoms. So that's kind of like really important. Now, there's plenty of environmental factors that can change this. Now, obviously, gluten, especially if it's conventional, why is this an issue? Because it's going to be, we have a lot of issues with, again, glyphosate and other herbicides and pesticides that are sprayed on our foods. This is not good. What they can do now they talk about this, and I've talked about this in the past, but the way around this is what they do is companies like Monsanto will say it does not affect mammalian cells, which is technically true, but it does affect bacteria. Turns out microbes are all in our digestive tract. And if you consume something like glyphosate, that is an antibiotic, that is going to cause antibiotic type issues in the gut. You do this every day over and over again, it's going to lead to issues in the long term. So modern wheat farming practices is going to be an issue if we're using that, because it's going to affect the gut. If we look at Dr. Stephanie Seneff, if you're familiar with her, in one of her papers, celiac disease is associated with imbalances in gut bacteria that can be fully explained by the known effects of glyphosate on gut bacteria. In other words, what she's saying is what glyphosate does is it affects the microbes in the gut. And yes, we are more microbes than human. That is true. We are an ecosystem. We are symbiotes. And what that does is it leaves an opportunity for opportunistic microbes to overgrow, like we were talking about, different types of fungi, yeast, etc., that can overgrow in this type of scenario. What this does is it can impair what's known as the cytochrome P450 enzymes. Now, these are really important for liver health. they're involved and responsible for detoxifying environmental pollutants. It can also activate or turn on vitamin D or vitamin D3, metabolizing vitamin A. It's also important for maintaining proper bile production. So, if this is an issue for a long term, this could lead to bile or gallbladder issues, and affects the integrity of the gut. So, not really good here. Sorry, my throat's a little scratchy, so bear with me. But yeah. So what happens is if we're using these pesticides that survive the the drying process, because it's also used as a drying agent for things like wheat, it these pesticides end up, like glyphosate, end up in our food. We consume them. It's going to affect the gut, affect the liver, and then once you do that, it could potentially be systemic. And if this is something we're consuming multiple times a day, that's not going to lead to good results at the end of the day. So one of the first things we got to do, of course, is like if you have or if you're consuming GMO or glyphosate treated foods, we got to get rid of them if we can. Packaged processed foods, same thing. Like getting rid of this stuff is really key. You have to remember, like the gut bacteria are vital for so many different functions in the body, like including manufacturing certain vitamins and minerals that we can't. Um, the digestion and absorbing, especially carbohydrates that they use to make short chain fatty acids, which actually helps heal the gut. They can actually break down toxins for us, and help regulate our immune system. It trains our immune system to know, okay, which ones of these are good, which ones of these are bad. So it provides support for that immune system as well. Now, things that can mess it up. Now, we already talked about antibiotics in terms of like pesticides, how they have antibiotic like effects. Other medications, a lot of different medications can do it. Processed foods can do it. Heavy metals can do it, which are obviously in a variety of different products that you can inject. Um, those are going to be issues. So, if some of these things are acting like antibiotics, they're going to destroy some of the bacteria. And when some of the bacteria are destroyed, it leads to opportunistic organisms growing, taking over, like yeast and mold that we were talking about. And these yeast and mold basically poke holes, create holes in the gut lining. Now you have something known as leaky gut. Okay, I got to take a sip of water quick. Oof. Okay. So that's one thing we can do. Now, as far as what so we get how this works, we get how molds and bacteria are issues, we get the idea that if we create an environment, an ecosystem for these things to thrive, they're going to lead to issues. So what are some of the things that we can do to essentially help stop this from happening? So there are plenty of things you can do. One of my favorites actually is juicing or smoothies. I tend to like a lot. One of the reasons is that these will already like pre-digest your food to a degree. So it allows for the nutrients to get absorbed much more quickly. So whether it's something like carrot juice or beet juice or celery, cucumbers, you could do plenty of it in different smoothies. Different types of fruit in smoothies are really, really good. Um, oranges, apples, especially if you're making them on your own, fantastic. Um, what you can also do is obviously you want to make sure you're getting enough water, ideally like roughly 50% or so of your body weight in water per day. Now, a lot of folks will talk about doing different types of like colon cleanses and like enema type things. I tend to not lean towards those. I think, well, obviously they're pretty invasive, but I think for the vast majority of people, they're unnecessary, and they can get expensive. So, if say like constipation for something, like if you have this damage and you're having trouble going regularly, there are plenty of reasons that that might be the case. Now, one of them we already talked about, which is antibiotics. So, antibiotics, if you're disrupting this microbiome, it's going to disrupt the motility of the gut, how well it moves. And if that happens, that's going to affect how well you can go to the bathroom or how often you're going to the bathroom. So, if you're taking antibiotics, you want to understand why. And if you are, you definitely want to be working towards healing some of that. Maybe introducing a probiotic like Megaspore or sauerkraut or something like that to help heal that because antibiotics, especially long term, are going to lead to more issues, especially when it comes to your gut health. Low fiber intake is a huge one. This is partially why I prefer blending to juicing a lot of the times, is because you still get that fiber, especially since so many folks don't get enough already. Most people, you should be getting, or according to at least the USDA or many experts, they will say you need at least 30 grams of fiber a day. I would say it tends to be over 50 if you're talking about optimal health. And to get there, an easy way to do it would be to include more blending, smoothies, salads. Obviously, getting more plant forward is going to be really helpful. So that's a big one. Biofilms are also a big one. So, what biofilms, or maybe you'll hear this as a mucoid plaque, essentially it's a layer. So, our digestive tract has a mucus layer that lines it, and this gets shed every day, or sorry, every so often. And sometimes things can get stuck in that, or it gets sticky, or it gets hard, and it affects our ability to digest food. So if we don't break down that biofilm and excrete it like we normally do, and it gets hard and thick and thickens, it's going to affect our ability to digest food. Um, what else? Sometimes being stressed out all the time can absolutely do it. So if you're stressed, if you're not letting certain things go, in Chinese medicine, this is a big thing because the large intestine, the colon, is actually associated with the metal element, and it's also associated like with literally not letting things go. You're holding on to something. So many times it could be a more psychological or emotional component. If you're not letting things go, you're holding on to something. Once you actually work through that, do the work with it. Again, look at books like The Biology of Belief or How to Do the Work or something that can help you kind of get to whatever that emotional root is. That's key. Along with biofilms, dysbiosis. So we talked about parasites a little bit before, but again, yeast, fungi, molds, viruses. That's a story for another day. But that is also going to be, if you're addressing that. So using natural antimicrobials, I talk about those a ton. Going to be talking about those quite a bit in my gut flush course that should be coming out soon too. So you will have all the options. So if you don't want to do an enema, and again, I don't think everyone needs to do them. There are different things you can do, like vitamin C flushes. You could try warm water in the morning, which I like. Again, doesn't have to be a tea. It could literally just be warm water. Some other herbs and teas that can be helpful, especially when it comes to the gut: comfrey tea, slippery elm, marshmallow, um, cabbage juice can actually be really helpful. I would go to herbs a little bit later because things like Cascara sagrada, um, senna, they can be a little bit addicting. So they're not things that I would recommend long term. I like one called Colax. That's pretty good by MediHerb. Chia seeds and flax seeds are also really good too. They'll help regulate the bowels. So chia seeds, flax seeds, yes, those are really good. Good catch. I don't know if I had that. Yeah. So that's really good. I like one called Colax, I think I just mentioned, which has Cascara Sagrada in it. I would not recommend taking it for longer than a week. You should be slowly increasing your fiber intake if you have to. Again, start with blending, start with juicing to help replenish and heal some of that gut lining. Maybe you need some gut healing herbs or antimicrobial herbs to help too. So, plenty of things you could do there. Abdominal massages you can do too. So you can actually bring your legs up if I'm sitting, but if I was lying face up, say on the floor, I can put my feet on the ground, bend my knees so I can get into the abdomen a little bit, and you can massage essentially from right to left, which would be a clockwise direction. And sometimes that can help. So you go kind of deep. You want to relax the abdominal wall, the muscles there, so it can get in. Dry brushing can actually be really helpful. So dry brushing again, if you've never done it, you're taking kind of like a pretty like tough bristle brush, and you're brushing towards the heart, and you could go from the neck and face down, you go from the arms towards the chest, you go from the legs up to the abdomen, all brushing essentially in the direction of the heart to help keep the lymph moving. So that's something else you could try too. You could try other things to like get your um to raise your core body temperature. This could help too. So things like daily exercise, that will actually help stimulate digestion too. Saunas can be helpful. Niacin can be. So can cayenne pepper. That'll help increase core body temperature, as any spicy food will. Um, Acupressure points can do that. So there are certain ones that can be really helpful here. So there's large intestine 4. That's between kind of the web of the thumb and the index finger. There's stomach 36, and again, you can look these up, which is below the knee, so I can't really show that right now. There's spleen 6, which is also on the ankle. There's large intestine 11 also, which sometimes can be for constipation as well, which is near like the elbow crease. So you can look those up exactly where they are, but rubbing those can be pretty helpful too. What else? What else? What else I have? Chiropractic, believe it or not, can be absolutely helpful. This is especially helpful with kids, colicky babies that are having trouble or are constipated. Sometimes it could be something going on in the low back or the neck that could be affecting your ability to evacuate. So that might be something that's useful. Foot rollers or facial massage or spinal massage can be really helpful. Again, probiotics sometimes could be helpful. Um, Again, if that's the case, I think there is again some sort of overgrowth or dysbiosis that needs to be addressed. Because if you have to stop taking probiotics and everything comes back, then there's something underlying that you have to address. But Megaspore Biotic is my favorite. I also like the Proflora 4R Restore, which is by Biocidin. Those are probably my two favorites. And then again, for some of like the emotional stuff that we talked about, we mentioned some books. Affirmations are really useful. So you can look up kind of how to use those. You could write them. You could say them into a mirror. You could sing. Again, generally they're going to be short sentences that are repeatable. So, and you could say that in front of a mirror. You could say that by yourself. You could sing. Decluttering can helpful. Sometimes a stuffy, cramped environment can mirror an internal environment too. You could also look into, things like or chakra balancing or prayer or any other kind of mental blocks that are really kind of helpful. So, um, those are the big things I got. I'm trying to see if I had a list, if I missed anything here. Oh, more antioxidants, just to kind of touch on that. So, again, another reason why juicing and blending is really useful, because you can get more of these antioxidant rich foods in things like berries and artichokes and blackberries and all different types of like usually darker, richly colored things are going to be your high antioxidant foods. That's what we got as far as the gut goes. This is unfortunately a multifactorial problem. It's not just, I don't know, it's an environmental thing. It's a political thing because of how companies like Monsanto essentially buy government support, which is really unfortunate. So it goes all the way up to the top. Um, Healthcare and obviously freedom to choose is always, of course, very important. And then the food system, which is involved in all of these because they don't go together. Bottom line is, if we change these, food system, healthcare, politics, environment, like, we can make incredible changes in the long term. So hope this helps. Again, if you haven't, if you could, please check out my new book. There's over 100. It's called Nature's Kitchen and Cabinet. The link is in my bio. It should also be in the description here. Over 150 different superfoods, different herbs, and then more importantly, like how you get in the kitchen, how you build meals that are more healthful. I'm going to be coming out with a cleansing course to kind of dispel a lot of the myths that we talk about, but also how you can build your own essentially. And I'm going to give a ton of options. I'm going to show you how to do it. I think it's something you could repeat maybe like 2, 3, 4 times a year. I like it to change of seasons personally, just easy to do. And hopefully that provides a lot of clarity. So thank you for tuning in. Again, if you want to work with me, the link is in my bio. Check out my book. You could do that too. And then keep an eye out for new stuff coming out because it's going to be a fun 2023. I'm really excited. Thank you all. Have a good one. Bye. Okay.